You have been told for years that lowering your total cholesterol is the only way to prevent a stroke. You have likely spent decades worrying about eating eggs or red meat, believing that every bite was clogging your arteries. But the medical community is finding that we have been focusing on the wrong number for a very long time. There is a specific type of cholesterol particle that actually drives the risk of a stroke, and it is often completely normal in people who are taking medication to lower their total number. The standard cholesterol test that most seniors get once a year does not tell the whole story. It is possible to have normal cholesterol and still be at high risk for a stroke, just as it is possible to have high cholesterol and have completely clean arteries. The difference lies in the quality of the particle, not just the quantity. I am Dr. Ben Harris, and today I am going to help you identify the specific number on your blood panel that actually matters for stroke prevention, and I will show you how to improve it using simple habits that also manage your blood pressure and blood sugar. Let me tell you about Robert. Robert came to see me when he was 72 years old. He was a disciplined man. He had been told in his late 60s that his heart health was declining, so he made what he thought were responsible changes. He completely removed visible fats from his diet. He stopped eating cheese. He stopped eating steak. Instead, Robert started his day with a large bowl of oatmeal and a glass of orange juice. For lunch, he would have a sandwich with lean turkey on whole wheat bread. He thought he was doing everything right. However, Robert began to experience dizziness and fatigue. When we looked at his blood work, his triglycerides were through the roof. He was confused. He asked me how he could have high fat in his blood when he was eating almost no fat in his diet. The mistake Robert made is a very common one. When you eat a diet that is low in fat but high in processed carbohydrates and fruit sugars, your blood sugar spikes. In older adults, our ability to process that sugar declines. The liver takes that excess sugar, the sugar from the juice, the bread, and the oatmeal, and it converts it directly into triglycerides. Triglycerides are a type of fat that circulates in your blood. When this number is high, it suggests that your insulin is not working well. This makes your blood thicker. It makes the blood more likely to clot. We made a simple change for Robert. We did not put him on medication immediately. Instead, we changed his breakfast. We removed the orange juice, which is essentially concentrated sugar without the fiber. We reduced the portion of oatmeal and added a source of protein and healthy fat, like walnuts or a piece of fish. Within 3 months, Robert's triglycerides dropped significantly. More importantly, his energy levels stabilized because his blood sugar was no longer spiking and crashing. The lesson here is that for stroke prevention, you must look at your triglyceride number. If it is high, it is usually a sign that your blood sugar is too high. To fix this, you do not need to starve yourself. You simply need to recognize that sugar, not fat, is often the driver of this specific risk factor. When you lower your intake of refined flour and liquid sugars, your liver stops pumping out these dangerous particles. This is beneficial for your blood pressure as well. When triglycerides are high, it often indicates high insulin levels. Insulin causes your body to retain sodium. When you retain sodium, you retain water. When you retain water, your blood volume increases and your blood pressure goes up. By lowering your triglycerides through blood sugar control, you are naturally helping your kidneys release that excess water. This takes the pressure off your heart and lowers your risk of a stroke from 2 different angles at the same time. It is a very effective way to manage your health because you are treating the root cause. You are not just treating the symptom. Before I move to the next item, I want to ask you a quick question to help us understand who is watching. Comment below with your age and the usual range of your top blood pressure number. It helps to see where everyone is starting from. The second item is understanding the physical shape of your cholesterol. This is about the small dense LDL. You have likely heard of LDL. It is often labeled as the bad cholesterol. Doctors have traditionally looked at the total amount of LDL in your blood and used that single number to determine if you need medication. However, recent understanding has shown us that LDL is not all the same. There are different sizes of LDL particles. This distinction is critical for seniors to understand because one type is relatively harmless, while the other type is a primary cause of strokes. Think of LDL particles as vehicles that carry energy through your bloodstream. Some of these particles are large and buoyant. They float through the bloodstream easily. They do not tend to get stuck in the artery walls. If you have a high number of these large particles, your total cholesterol number might look high on paper, but your actual risk of a blockage is low. The other type of LDL is small and dense. These particles are heavy. Because they are so small, they can easily penetrate the lining of your blood vessels. Once they get inside the vessel wall, they oxidize. This means they become inflamed and start to build up plaque. This is where the connection to blood pressure becomes undeniable. Let me introduce you to Martha. Martha was 68 years old when she came to my office. She was in a state of high anxiety. Her general practitioner had told her that her cholesterol was slightly elevated and that she needed to go on a strong medication immediately. Martha was terrified of having a stroke. She was also experiencing side effects from other medications and did not want to add another one unless it was absolutely necessary. When we looked closer at her health profile, we found something interesting. Her total cholesterol was indeed slightly high, but her HDL, the protective cholesterol, was very low. And more concerning than her cholesterol was her blood pressure. Her blood pressure was consistently averaging around 150/90. This combination is dangerous. Here is why. Imagine your arteries are like a smooth highway. When your blood pressure is high, the force of the blood hits the artery walls hard. This turbulence creates tiny micro tears in the lining of the arteries. This is damage to the endothelium, the inner layer of the blood vessel. When you have those tiny tears caused by high blood pressure, and you also have those small, dense LDL particles circulating in your blood, the particles get stuck in the tears. It is like dirt getting trapped in a scratch on a smooth surface. Martha's problem was not just her cholesterol. It was the fact that her high blood pressure was creating the damage that allowed the cholesterol to stick. We needed to change her focus. Instead of obsessing over the total cholesterol number, we focused on lowering her blood pressure and reducing the number of small, dense LDL particles. Small, dense LDL is often caused by the same thing as high triglycerides, high blood sugar, and refined carbohydrates. Martha made a change. She started monitoring her carbohydrates strictly. She cut back on the crackers she ate as snacks and replaced them with almonds. She stopped eating pasta 3 times a week and switched to zucchini noodles or roasted vegetables. Simultaneously, we worked on her blood pressure. We used calming breathing techniques and adjusted her sodium intake. As her blood pressure came down, the scratches on her artery walls began to heal. As she reduced her carbohydrates, her liver stopped producing the small, dense LDL particles and started producing the larger, safer ones. 6 months later, Martha's total cholesterol number had not changed much, but her blood work showed a completely different risk profile. Her triglycerides were down, her HDL was up, and her blood pressure was safe. She was no longer a candidate for a stroke, despite what the total number said. This supports steadier readings and a healthier heart. If you are a senior, you need to ask your doctor to look deeper than just the total number. You want to know if you have the small, dense particles. And remember, those particles are most dangerous when your blood pressure is uncontrolled. You cannot separate the two issues. Here is another helpful step. The third item is about accuracy. We call this the silent gap in measurement. You cannot effectively prevent a stroke if you are operating with the wrong data. One of the most common reasons seniors end up on high doses of medication or fail to realize they are in danger is because they are measuring their blood pressure incorrectly at home. The risk of stroke is directly tied to your blood pressure. If your pressure is consistently high, your risk creates a straight line upward. But many people are reacting to numbers that are false. Let's talk about Samuel. Samuel was 75 years old. He was a retired engineer, so he was very meticulous with his numbers. He kept a logbook of his blood pressure readings that went back 3 years. He came to me because he was experiencing dizziness and weakness. He was on 3 different blood pressure medications because his home readings were consistently showing 160/95. His doctor kept increasing his dosage based on Samuel's logbook. I asked Samuel to show me exactly how he measured his blood pressure. He told me his routine. He would wake up, walk to the kitchen, make his coffee, feed his cat, and then sit down at the kitchen table. He would immediately put the cuff on his arm and press the button. This was the mistake. When you are moving around, walking, making coffee, bending down to feed a pet, your heart rate increases and your blood pressure rises to support that activity. This is normal. It takes time for your cardiovascular system to return to its resting baseline. By measuring immediately after sitting down, Samuel was capturing his active blood pressure, not his resting blood pressure. He was making medical decisions based on a number that was artificially elevated. Because his doctor thought his pressure was 160, he was prescribed medication to lower it. But his actual resting pressure was likely closer to 130. The medication pushed his pressure down too low, causing the dizziness and the fainting risk. This is very dangerous for seniors because a fall can be just as devastating as a heart event. We changed Samuel's routine. I instructed him to sit in a chair with his back supported and his feet flat on the floor. I told him he had to sit there in silence for fully 5 minutes before he even touched the cuff. This 5-minute period is the silent gap. It allows your body to settle. It allows the blood vessels to relax. Samuel was skeptical, but he tried it. He sat for 5 minutes. He did not talk. He did not watch TV. He just breathed. When he took his measurement after the 5-minute gap, his reading was 138/85. It was still slightly elevated, but it was nowhere near the dangerous levels he thought he had. Over the next few weeks, with his doctor's supervision, he was able to reduce his medication. His dizziness went away. His energy returned. For you to know your true stroke risk, you must follow this protocol. You need a chair with a hard back. Do not sit on a soft couch where your body sinks in, as this compresses your abdomen and can raise the reading. Keep your feet flat on the floor. Do not cross your legs. Crossing your legs at the knees or ankles can raise your systolic pressure, the top number, by up to 10 points. Rest your arm on a table so that the cuff is at the same level as your heart. If your arm is dangling at your side, the reading will be too high. If your arm is held up too high, the reading will be too low. And most importantly, honor the 5-minute wait. This is critical because clinical decisions regarding your stroke risk are based on these numbers. If the input is wrong, the treatment will be wrong. Another easy change is to check your cuff size. If you have lost muscle mass in your arms as you have aged, a standard cuff might be too loose. If the cuff is too loose, it can give false readings. Conversely, if it is too tight, it will artificially raise the number. There should be a printed line on the cuff that tells you if it fits your arm circumference correctly. Once you have accurate numbers, you can begin to use the leverage points I am sharing with you to actually lower them. This brings us to a very practical tool you can use every single day. The fourth item is the post-meal flow. We have discussed how high blood sugar converts into dangerous triglycerides. We have discussed how high blood pressure damages the arteries to let the cholesterol in. Now, I want to give you a specific tool to lower both of those risks immediately after you eat. The time right after a meal is a critical window for your body. When you eat, your digestive system breaks down food into glucose. This glucose enters your bloodstream. In a healthy young person, the body quickly releases insulin. The cells open up and the glucose is absorbed. But as we age, our cells become a little more resistant to insulin. The glucose stays in the blood longer. This post-meal sugar spike is very damaging. It creates inflammation in the blood vessels. It forces the pancreas to pump out massive amounts of insulin. And as we learned earlier, high insulin keeps your blood pressure high. Most seniors eat their lunch or dinner and then sit down. They might read the paper, watch the news, or take a nap. This is the worst thing you can do for your stroke risk. Let's look at Evelyn. Evelyn was 70 years old. She enjoyed cooking and ate good homemade meals, but she told me that every afternoon around 2 p.m., she felt incredibly heavy and sluggish. She would often fall asleep in her chair. Her blood work showed that her fasting blood sugar was okay, but her A1C, which measures the average over 3 months, was creeping up. This meant she was having spikes during the day that she wasn't seeing on her morning tests. Evelyn's blood pressure also tended to be higher in the afternoon. I explained to Evelyn that when she sat down immediately after eating, that glucose had nowhere to go. Her muscles were at rest, so they didn't need fuel. So the sugar just sat in her blood, causing damage and converting into fat. We introduced the 10-minute rule. I told Evelyn that she needed to wait about 20 minutes after finishing her meal, just enough time to let the stomach settle, and then she needed to move her body for exactly 10 minutes. This does not mean going to the gym. It does not mean sweating or breathing hard. It simply means engaging the large muscles of the legs. Evelyn started simply. She would walk around her house. She would walk up and down her hallway. Sometimes, if the weather was nice, she would walk to the end of her driveway and back a few times. Here is what happens biologically when you do this. When you contract your leg muscles by walking, the muscles require energy. They pull the glucose out of the bloodstream immediately to use as fuel. They do this without even needing as much insulin. It is like opening a relief valve. By walking for just 10 minutes, Evelyn blunted the sugar spike. Because the sugar didn't spike, her insulin levels stayed lower. Because her insulin stayed lower, her blood vessels remained more relaxed, and her blood pressure did not surge. After 2 weeks, Evelyn noticed she wasn't feeling sleepy in the afternoon anymore. She had more energy. And when we checked her blood pressure at her next visit, her numbers were consistently lower. This is a strategy you can use today. It is especially important after your largest meal of the day. If you eat a heavy dinner, do not go straight to the couch. Do the dishes standing up. Walk around the living room during the commercial breaks, or simply take a gentle stroll around the block. You are manually assisting your body in processing the fuel you just put into it. You are protecting your arteries from the sugar damage that leads to plaque buildup. If you have mobility issues and cannot walk easily, you can do this from a chair. You can do seated marches, lifting your knees up and down. You can do leg extensions. The goal is simply to contract the large muscles of the lower body. Please be mindful of your safety. If you feel dizzy, unsteady, or short of breath, stop immediately and rest. Do not push yourself to the point of exhaustion. This is about gentle flow, not rigorous exercise. Also, if you use insulin or medication that lowers your blood sugar, be aware that this activity will lower your numbers faster than usual. You may need to check your levels to ensure you do not drop too low. This simple habit changes the way your body processes food and significantly lowers the burden on your heart. Now, we have covered the types of cholesterol, the importance of accurate measurement, and how to clear sugar from your blood. But there is a missing mineral that acts as a shield for your arteries, and most seniors are severely deficient in it. I will explain exactly how to get it without supplements in the second part of this video. If you know someone over 50 who could benefit from this information, consider sharing this with them, and subscribe for more simple blood pressure and blood sugar tips. I have more to show you regarding how stress and sleep directly dictate your morning numbers. We need to discuss the chemical that stiffens your arteries overnight and how to neutralize it. The fifth item is the potassium shield. This is the most overlooked dietary lever for stroke prevention. We have spent the last 40 years telling seniors to lower their sodium. You see low sodium printed on soup cans, bread packages, and frozen meals. And while reducing excess salt is important, it is only half of the equation. The biology of your blood vessels is controlled by a delicate balance between two minerals, sodium and potassium. Sodium is the mineral that constricts. It tightens the vessel walls to maintain pressure. Potassium is the mineral that relaxes. It softens the vessel walls and allows them to expand. If you lower your sodium intake but your potassium intake remains low, your body still holds on to tension. Your arteries remain stiff, and when arteries are stiff, your blood pressure stays up, and those small cholesterol particles we discussed earlier are driven deeper into the vessel lining. Let me tell you about Albert. Albert was 73 years old. He was a man who followed the rules. His doctor told him his blood pressure was creeping up, so Albert went to the grocery store and bought everything with a low-salt label. He ate low-salt crackers, low-salt turkey, and white rice. He drank tea and water. He was very proud of his diet. Yet when he came to my clinic, his systolic blood pressure, the top number, was hovering around 155. His arteries were stiff. Albert was confused. He said, "I don't touch the salt shaker. Why is my pressure high?" The problem was not what Albert was eating, it was what he wasn't eating. His diet was full of beige foods: bread, rice, turkey, oatmeal. These foods have almost zero potassium. Without potassium, your kidneys cannot do their job. Your kidneys use potassium to signal the release of sodium. If you do not have enough potassium in your system, your body hoards sodium, even if you aren't eating much of it. We completely changed Albert's approach. We didn't focus on taking things away. We focused on adding things in. We aimed for him to get 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day from food. We did not use supplements, and I want to be very clear about this. Do not take potassium supplements unless your doctor specifically prescribes them. Potassium in pill form can interfere with heart medications and can be dangerous if the dosage is off. You must get this from food. Albert started adding half an avocado to his lunch. An avocado has more potassium than a banana and much less sugar. He started adding a cup of cooked spinach to his dinner. Cooked spinach is a powerhouse. It wilts down so you can eat a lot of it easily, and it is packed with the mineral. He swapped his afternoon snack of crackers for a handful of pumpkin seeds. Within 4 weeks, Albert's body began to let go. His kidneys started flushing out the excess water and sodium. His arteries began to relax. His blood pressure dropped by 18 points. And because his pressure dropped, the risk of those cholesterol particles causing a stroke dropped with it. This is a change you can make immediately. Look at your plate. If it is mostly brown or white, you are likely deficient in potassium. You need greens. You need color. Other excellent sources for seniors include baked potatoes with the skin on, sweet potatoes, salmon, and white beans. However, I must include a safety note here. If you have been diagnosed with advanced kidney disease, or if you are on certain medications like ACE inhibitors or potassium-sparing diuretics, you must speak with your doctor before increasing your potassium intake. In those specific cases, your kidneys may not be able to process the increase. But for the vast majority of older adults, this mineral is the missing key to flexible, healthy arteries. This leads us to a factor that isn't about food at all, but it changes your blood chemistry just as much as sugar does. The sixth item is the cortisol spike. We often think of stroke risk as a plumbing problem, pipes getting clogged with grease. But it is also a chemical problem driven by your nervous system. You can eat the perfect diet. You can walk every day. You can take your medication. But if you are living in a state of chronic low-level stress, your body is producing a hormone called cortisol. And for a senior concerned about stroke, cortisol is dangerous. Cortisol does two things that directly impact the cholesterol and stroke risk we are discussing. First, it thickens your blood. It increases the production of red blood cells and clotting factors because, evolutionarily, your body thinks you are in danger and might be injured, so it prepares to clot the blood to save your life. Thicker blood is harder to pump. It raises your blood pressure. Second, cortisol dumps sugar into your bloodstream. When you are stressed, your liver releases stored glucose to give you energy to fight or flight. I want to share the story of June. June was 69 years old. She was a caregiver for her husband who had mobility issues. She was a saint of a woman, always putting others first. June came to me because her numbers were erratic. She told me, "Dr. Ben, I barely eat. I don't have time to cook big meals. I usually just have a piece of toast or a salad." Despite eating very few calories, her blood sugar was in the pre-diabetic range, and her cholesterol was high. She was frustrated because she felt she was starving herself and still getting sick. The culprit was stress. June was in a constant state of worry. She worried about her husband. She worried about finances. She worried about the house. This constant worry meant her cortisol tap was always open. Her body was flooding her system with sugar from her own liver to handle the stress. That sugar was converting to triglycerides. Her blood was thickening from the cortisol. She was a prime candidate for a stroke, not because of her diet, but because of her hormones. We had to treat the stress as a medical condition. We introduced a simple breathing technique called the physiological sigh. This is not meditation. It is a mechanical way to switch off the stress response. I taught June to do this. Inhale deeply through the nose, then take a second, shorter inhale on top of it to fully inflate the lungs. Then exhale slowly and fully through the mouth. She did this 3 times whenever she felt overwhelmed. This specific pattern of breathing pops open the tiny air sacs in the lungs and offloads carbon dioxide. It sends a direct signal to the brain to slow the heart rate and lower blood pressure. June also started taking 10 minutes a day just for herself, not to clean, not to plan, but to sit in the garden. It took time, but as her stress levels came down, her fasting blood sugar dropped 15 points. Her blood pressure stabilized. She hadn't changed her diet, but she changed her internal chemistry. For you, recognizing stress is vital. If you find yourself clenching your jaw, holding your shoulders up by your ears, or feeling a tightness in your chest, your cortisol is high. You cannot eliminate all stress from your life, but you can change how your body reacts to it. Using the breath to manually lower your pressure protects your arteries from that daily damage. Here is one more helpful step regarding your environment. The 7th item is the restoration phase. This is about your sleep. But specifically, it is about what we call the dipping status of your blood pressure. In a healthy body, when you go to sleep, your blood pressure should drop by about 10% to 20%. We call this dipping. It is the time when your heart gets a vacation. It slows down, the pressure eases, and the arteries repair themselves. However, many seniors are non-dippers. Their blood pressure stays just as high at night as it is during the day. This is a massive risk factor for stroke. If your pressure never drops, your arteries are under 24-hour siege. This usually happens because of poor sleep quality or sleep apnea. Let's look at Richard. Richard was 71. He was a morning lark. He woke up every day at 4:30 a.m. He told me he slept fine, but he admitted he woke up 3 or 4 times a night to use the bathroom or adjust the covers. When we monitored his blood pressure over 24 hours, we saw the problem. His pressure never dipped. And worse, around 4 a.m., right before he woke up, he had a massive morning surge. His pressure would skyrocket. This morning surge is dangerous. Statistically, more strokes and heart attacks happen in the early morning hours than at any other time. This is when the blood is thickest and the pressure rises fastest. Richard's sleep environment was the issue. His room was too warm, and he had a street lamp shining through his window. We made changes to optimize his restoration phase. First, we cooled the room. Older adults often keep their homes very warm, but for deep sleep, your body temperature needs to drop. We set his thermostat to 68 degrees at night. Second, we installed blackout curtains. Even a small amount of light can interfere with melatonin production and keep the brain in a light, alert stage of sleep. Third, we changed his water intake. Richard was drinking a large glass of water right before bed. This was causing the bathroom trips. We moved his hydration to earlier in the day and stopped fluids 2 hours before sleep. The result was that Richard began to sleep in 4-hour blocks instead of 1-hour blocks. When he started sleeping deeply, his body regained its dipper status. His nighttime pressure went down. This meant his heart was finally getting that 8-hour rest period every night. His morning surge flattened out. Instead of waking up with a pounding heart and high pressure, he woke up calm with a safe reading. You can do this at home. Look at your bedroom. Is it a cave? Is it cool, dark, and quiet? If not, you are robbing your heart of its recovery time. This supports steadier readings and protects you during those critical early morning hours. The 8th item is the magnesium key. We just discussed how potassium acts as a shield to balance sodium, but there is another mineral that acts as the off switch for the tension in your artery walls. Without it, your blood vessels remain in a state of constant low-grade spasm. This mineral is magnesium. In the context of stroke prevention, magnesium is critical because it regulates calcium. You likely know that calcium is good for your bones, but in your arteries, calcium contributes to hardening. It forms the rigid structure of plaque. If you have too much calcium floating in your blood and not enough magnesium to manage it, that calcium deposits into your vessel walls, turning them from flexible hoses into stiff pipes. When arteries are stiff, your heart has to pump much harder to push blood through them. This raises your top number, systolic pressure, and increases the shear force against the cholesterol deposits we are trying to manage. Let me introduce you to Thomas. Thomas was 74 years old. He came to see me not because of his blood pressure, but because he was suffering from terrible leg cramps at night. He would wake up in agony with his calves locked up. When we checked his vitals, his blood pressure was 148/90. He told me he had been on a diuretic, a water pill, for 5 years to control his pressure. This was the connection. Diuretics are effective at lowering pressure by flushing out water, but they often flush out minerals like magnesium along with it. Thomas was depleted. His leg cramps were his muscles shouting for magnesium, but his heart and arteries were also cramping, just silently. Thomas's diet was typical for many seniors living alone: toast, tea, canned soup, and occasional pasta. There was almost no magnesium in his food intake. We needed to relax his arteries from the inside out. We did not stop his medication, but we changed his fuel. We introduced specific magnesium-rich foods that are easy for seniors to digest. We started with pumpkin seeds, pepitas. These are one of the most concentrated sources of magnesium on the planet. I asked Thomas to eat 2 tablespoons of raw pumpkin seeds every afternoon as a snack. We also added a daily serving of cooked Swiss chard or spinach to his dinner. The change was not overnight, but it was steady. Within 3 weeks, the leg cramps disappeared. This was the first sign that his muscles were relaxing. 2 months later, at his follow-up, his blood pressure had drifted down to 132/82. His arteries were no longer fighting against the blood flow. They had softened. For you, this is a simple addition. If you are experiencing muscle twitches, cramps, or a heart rhythm that feels slightly irregular, palpitations, you might be low in magnesium. Focus on seeds, nuts, like almonds and cashews, and dark leafy greens. Dark chocolate, 70% cocoa or higher, also contains magnesium, though you must be mindful of the sugar and caffeine content. By ensuring you have enough magnesium, you prevent the calcium from stiffening your arteries, keeping them pliable enough to handle pressure changes without damage. Most older adults can try this safely. However, just like with potassium, if you have advanced kidney disease, check with your doctor before making major changes to your intake of mineral-rich foods. This supports steadier readings and a more relaxed cardiovascular system. Here is another helpful step regarding how your body physically removes cholesterol. The 9th item is the bile trap. This is a mechanism that very few people talk about, but it is the primary way your body actually gets rid of cholesterol. You might believe that if you eat less cholesterol, your levels will drop, but your liver produces the vast majority of the cholesterol in your body. To lower your numbers and reduce stroke risk, you don't just need to stop putting it in, you need a way to escort it out. The liver uses cholesterol to make bile. Bile is a fluid that helps you digest fats. When you eat a meal, your gallbladder releases bile into your intestines. Here is the catch. In most people, up to 95% of that bile, and the cholesterol contained in it, is reabsorbed from the intestine back into the bloodstream to be used again. Your body is very efficient at recycling. It recycles the cholesterol over and over. To prevent a stroke, we want to break this cycle. We want to trap that old cholesterol in the gut and flush it out of the body completely. The only thing that can do this is soluble fiber. Soluble fiber is not the roughage like bran that just helps you go to the bathroom. Soluble fiber turns into a gel when it mixes with water. This gel is sticky. It binds to the bile in your digestive tract. Because the bile is stuck in this gel, your body cannot reabsorb it. It passes out of your body as waste. Because the liver senses that the bile is gone, it has to pull new cholesterol out of your bloodstream to make more. This is how you naturally lower your LDL levels. Let's talk about Margaret. Margaret was 66. She was thin and active, but her LDL cholesterol was persistently high. She was frustrated because she didn't eat fatty foods. She lived on tea, toast, and grilled chicken. The problem was a lack of the gel. Her diet had no soluble fiber. Her body was just recycling the same cholesterol she had 10 years ago. Margaret admitted she didn't like the texture of oatmeal, which is the classic source of soluble fiber, so we found a different route. We introduced beans, black beans, kidney beans, and lentils. I asked her to add half a cup of beans to her daily routine, perhaps in a soup or a salad. We also added a psyllium husk supplement, a natural plant fiber that is pure soluble fiber. She took 1 teaspoon mixed in a large glass of water before her dinner. The results were mechanical and effective. The fiber gel trapped the bile. Her liver was forced to clean her blood to make more. In 3 months, her LDL number dropped by 30 points. She had not changed the rest of her diet. She simply created an exit route for the cholesterol. You can do this at home. Foods rich in soluble fiber include oats, barley, beans, apples, the pectin in the flesh, and carrots. Think of soluble fiber as a sponge. If you have high sugar, it slows down the absorption. If you have high cholesterol, it binds it and removes it. It works on both of your major risk factors simultaneously. However, a note of caution. If you are not used to eating fiber, start slowly. If you go from 0 to high fiber in 1 day, you will experience gas and bloating. Start with a small amount and increase it over a few weeks. And you must drink plenty of water, or the fiber can cause constipation. This supports cleaner arteries and stable blood sugar. This leads us to a technique that lowers blood pressure using your muscles, but without moving a single joint. The 10th item is the isometric hold. Many seniors are afraid to exercise because of arthritis, knee pain, or a fear of falling. They worry that raising their heart rate might be dangerous, but there is a form of exercise that is scientifically proven to lower blood pressure, and you can do it while sitting in a chair. It is called isometric exercise. This means you are contracting a muscle without moving the joint. Think of it as squeezing or holding tension. When you squeeze a muscle and hold it for a specific amount of time, you temporarily compress the blood vessels in that muscle. When you release the squeeze, a rush of blood flows back in. This rush of blood triggers the lining of your arteries to release a gas called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the body's most powerful vasodilator. It tells the blood vessels to open up and relax. It is like a natural medication that you produce yourself. Let me share the story of James. James was 78. He had severe osteoarthritis in his knees and hips. He could not walk for the 10-minute flow we discussed earlier. He felt helpless because his blood pressure was rising and he couldn't exercise it down. I taught James the hand grip protocol. I told him to get a simple stress ball or a rolled-up hand towel. While sitting in his armchair watching the news, he would squeeze the object with his right hand as hard as he comfortably could, about 30% to 50% of his maximum strength. He held that squeeze for 2 minutes, just holding. Then he rested for 1 minute. Then he switched to the left hand for 2 minutes. He did this twice for each hand. The whole routine took about 12 minutes. He did this 3 times a week. Because he was stimulating the release of nitric oxide system-wide, his blood pressure began to respond. It wasn't immediate, but after 4 weeks, his resting systolic pressure had dropped by 10 points. This is incredible leverage. A 10-point drop is comparable to the effect of some medications, and James did it without putting any impact on his painful knees. You can do this with a store-bought grip trainer, a rubber ball, or even by pressing your hands together in a prayer position and pushing hard. The rule is, sustain the tension for 2 minutes, rest, repeat. This is easy on the joints. However, a safety note, while you are squeezing, you must not hold your breath. Holding your breath while squeezing can spike your blood pressure temporarily. You must breathe normally and rhythmically throughout the 2-minute hold. If you feel lightheaded, release the tension immediately. This stimulates your own natural vessel dilators and combats the stiffness of aging arteries. Now, one final crucial environmental factor that directly affects the thickness of your blood. The 11th item is the thermal trigger. We often ignore the physical effect of temperature on our blood vessels. As we age, our ability to regulate body temperature declines, and our blood vessels become more sensitive to cold. Cold is a vasoconstrictor. This means when your skin gets cold, your blood vessels clamp down to preserve heat. This clamping down instantly raises your blood pressure. It also increases the viscosity, the thickness of your blood, making it harder for the heart to pump and easier for clots to form. This is why we see a spike in strokes and heart attacks during the winter months. Let's look at Patricia. Patricia was 70. She lived in a region with cold winters. She was active and independent. One morning, after a snowstorm, she went out to clear her walkway. She wasn't wearing a scarf, and she was breathing in the freezing cold air. She felt a tightness in her chest and became very dizzy. Her blood pressure had spiked dangerously. The cold air hitting her face and the cold air entering her lungs triggered a reflex that constricted her coronary arteries at the exact moment she was exerting herself. We had to establish a thermal safety rule for Patricia. I explained that she needed to keep her periphery warm. Before going out, she needed to cover her neck and mouth with a scarf. Breathing through a scarf warms the air before it hits the lungs, preventing that internal shock. But this also applies indoors. Many seniors keep their houses cool to save on heating bills. However, studies show that living in a house below 64 degrees Fahrenheit can keep blood pressure chronically elevated. Patricia started keeping her home slightly warmer, and she wore warm socks and layers indoors. She also stopped taking cold showers, which she thought were invigorating, but were actually spiking her pressure every morning. For you, be aware of the chill. If your hands and feet are always cold, your blood pressure is likely higher than it needs to be. Warm water, warm clothes, and covering your nose and mouth in freezing weather are legitimate medical strategies for stroke prevention. This protects your heart from unnecessary mechanical stress. Conclusion. We have now built a complete picture of what it truly means to prevent a stroke and manage your cardiovascular health after the age of 60. We started this journey by busting the myth that total cholesterol is the enemy. We learned that the real villains are the triglycerides, driven by sugar, and the small, dense LDL particles that slip into the cracks of your artery walls. We discovered that those cracks are often caused by high blood pressure, which pushes the particles in. We discussed how to measure that pressure accurately by respecting the silent gap, and how to use the post-meal flow to burn off sugar before it causes damage. We added the potassium shield and the magnesium key to chemically relax the artery walls, and we learned how soluble fiber acts as a trap to escort cholesterol out of the body for good. We addressed the invisible drivers, the cortisol from stress that thickens your blood, and the importance of the restoration phase during sleep to let your heart rest. And finally, we added the power of isometric holds to release nitric oxide and the importance of thermal safety to prevent dangerous constriction. You now have a toolkit of 11 specific levers. You do not need to pull all of them at once. That is the quickest way to fail. Start with one. Maybe this week you simply buy a bag of pumpkin seeds for magnesium. Next week you focus on waiting 5 minutes before checking your blood pressure. The week after that, you try the post-dinner walk. These are small, calm, consistent actions. But biologically, they are powerful. They change the environment of your blood. They turn your body from a state of storage and stiffness to a state of flow and flexibility. You have the power to change your numbers. It is not just about the medication. It is about the daily inputs you give your body. If you found this guide helpful, please share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear it. There is someone you know who is worried about their heart right now. Send this to them, and make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss our next deep dive into senior health. I'm Dr. Ben Harris. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.